We have been working in different parts of India in very degraded ecosystems where the water levels have fallen very low, where the forests have virtually disappeared, where the crops are failing, in trying to restore those landscapes along with village communities by forming village institutions where village people sit and decide on rules and regulations to manage land and water. We are working with some 5,300 plus villages in 9 provinces in India. I imagine the award is in recognition of the mobilization of the local communities in restoring degraded landscapes.
And these landscapes are in the Gujarat region of India, am I right? Or all across the country?
They're in different parts, some from arid to semi-arid to subhumid to humid, very humid conditions in about 8-9 provinces of India, in 30 locations that we work. So it's quite widespread.
And is there a common reason why these lands are degraded? Is it due to industry or people just not managing the lands properly or overgrazing? Give us a sense about why these lands are in the state they're in.
I guess you mentioned some of the reasons, and I'd say that all of them are somewhere responsible. I think without singling out any, there is a larger political economy in the degradation of land and soil. That's where there is power in governing land, in appropriating from whatever resources. It's these drivers which ultimately send signals, which send land into deterioration or water into overexploitation. So in different landscapes, you would come across different causes and different drivers. The more plausible ones that I heard of was in about 40-50 years ago. Virtually these lands were when we had the independence, with the transfer of lands from the Queen to the Indian state, there was a virtual gap in institutional breakdown. I mean, there was a virtual institutional breakdown in local peoples managing the resources. So that was one singular dimension where people used to govern and there was no governing anymore. So all the land or most of the land became everybody's land and there was a free-for-all situation.
And give us a sense of what you have been doing with local communities. And I mean, are these, when we talk about local communities, I guess it could mean anything from 5 to 10 or 20 people. So give us a sense about how big these communities are you're working with. What are you actually doing with them?
It's about, typically a village or a habitation, as we say, is about 40 to 50 households, so 200, 300 people in a village. We usually select places where there is community land and where there is degradation already set in. Degradation, as I mentioned, in terms of loss of vegetation or falling water tables and acute poverty. These are the criteria based on which we select. In terms of what is it that we do, we actually build on the traditional customary practices that are still existing in the villages. You might have temples, you might have village small chit funds, on the rules and regulations based on which people manage their simple resources, but which they customarily accept. We try to extend that into managing a pasture or a forest or a water body. So build on rules and regulations which are there and enlarge it so that everybody is included. Then challenge the village, because most of the traditional institutions are also not necessarily very democratic. So you challenge them to include the poor people, include Dalits, that is the low caste people, include women into both as participation as equal members and in deciding about the future of those resources. That's what we do in villages.
And typically, are you invited in, or do you identify a village and then go and try and convince the inhabitants that they need to, or it would be in their interest to work with you?
Different sets of villages. There are some villages which have a water body being managed well, but they don't know what to do with the land, and you need to get into discussions with the government because you need the property rights clear. So there we come up with the legal access to the land. In certain places, everything has broken down. So we start from the temple or from the village fund and then extend it to land or to water body. In some places, even the forests are pretty well managed on their own. But then we have to challenge them. Are they democratic? as the last person in the village included. So there's some ranges of institutions with which we associate ourselves.
I probably shouldn't say this, but India is one of those countries I always feel where everyone has a strong opinion about everything. What are the and I mean that in a good way. It's a fantastic place to visit. But what are the challenges when you go into a village? What advice, I guess, do you have for people who are thinking about doing similar schemes, not just in India but around the world, in going into villages and working with the people there? What tips would you provide?
Well, I would say as a bottom line, the way we talk to young people who join us is do no good, it's okay, but don't do any harm. That's the way to start it. And the second thing that I kind of urge upon young people and even elderly people is to repose faith in local communities, total faith. Just because of their ignorance in terms of literacy, it doesn't make them less wiser. They, in fact, probably more wiser about their landscapes than anyone else. So if we repose our faith in their ability to rule themselves and meet them as equal members, not with an attitude of I am okay and you're not okay, I think we can achieve a lot. This is the way we engage with village communities, and if there are people who are interested in working on similar areas, I think there are two broad ways, particularly on common property resources. One way is to include everybody, and it's only then that it is feasible to maintain them. Otherwise, whoever is left out would become a threat to maintenance of that resource. So it becomes almost necessary that you include everyone who is gaining from it. The other kind of an approach, which I greatly respect also, but it may not be so much applicable for common property, is to take the side of the very poor and think that the whole property has to be theirs. It's a kind of a distributive justice that you're talking about. Well, I'm not sure whether the commons would remain viable, but yes, as a political decision, yes, that's also reasonable that in the larger distributive justice, some person should be given something more today. So these two approaches are very clear. As an organization which has, say, middle class people, where we are also thinking about our own salaries, and we have great respect for the activists who are working on rights and extreme rights, but we also think about degraded landscapes which need to be brought into better semblance of life. So both the approaches are equally valuable.
Do you have to be able to demonstrate to local communities that the work that you do will provide an economic benefit for them?
I would say, yeah, this is not some butterflies and tigers kind of work. No, this is absolute business sense from different dimensions. Within a couple of years, where the geology supports such work, you see water levels changing. There are seepages. If nothing, the period of availability of water increases. So that's it. Once you have water in your landscape, it's like you're like playing God. It's like magic all over. Different forms of life come into being. So that's one clear. And if you have water, you can have second crop. You can have better livestock production, which means absolute, vibrant rural economies. That's very strong thing. The second dimension is collective action, which is also economic, I would argue. That it is only because of this people sitting together, if nothing, the transaction costs between individuals and the state greatly reduce, because many people actually talk among themselves, resolve issues, and you don't have to unnecessarily exchange notes to come to some kind of a decision. So both are very clear economic propositions. In the long term, we have seen, long term in the sense I'm talking of 5-6 years, pollinators increasing even in very, very degraded landscapes, so much so that, and some studies that we have done, the preliminary results are showing that pollination because of these butterflies has increased in an area much higher than where pesticides and all have been used. So pollinators and where the shrubs are around, definitely. So you are to that extent saving the use of pollinators. Thereby, especially in degraded landscapes and with very poor people, saving money is also an economic proposition. So that's how pollinators are. There are a variety of other things like increased availability of fodder, which almost comes in the first season itself. If you wait for a few years, there's so much that in certain villages in the eastern part of India, out of the 53 products which come from the forest, only 5 go to market. 48 are consumed locally. And this means it's for their food security. And I'm also telling you this, out of this 48, there are many tubers, which is the only food which they consume between May and July. That's only food. They don't have any other thing. So that's what it means to a village community.